Nancy, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner Pauley? Here. Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Yates?
Here.
Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Edgar?
Here.
Chair Shaw?
Well, I guess Chair Shaw is not here today, so I'm filling in. The next item on the on our agenda is citizen comments, and if there are any citizen comments, none? Okay. Then the next item is adopting the agenda. Are we ready to adopt the agenda? Okay.
To adopt?
Okay.
No, we don't have to.
Okay. So, the minutes of the 4A, minutes of the September 19th, 2012 regular meeting. And I guess that's up to you, Nancy.
We need a motion and a second, and your screens should be, should have the indication there.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, I move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
I second.
So there are motions from Kathy Roth to approve, and seconded by Betty Maum.
Motion passes unanimously, with one abstention.
Thank you.
Okay.
So next is a presentation on the Clackamas Cove, and I would defer now to Eric Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last meeting of the Urban Renewal Commission, the board decided to, well, there was a request that was made by Clackamas Cove LLC to come talk to the commission to discuss the progress that they've made to date and an approach in moving forward. We brought that request to the commission at the last meeting, and they accepted. So we've invited Ed Darrow and Randy Tyler of Clackamas Cove LLC to come speak before you tonight to present some of the work they've done and some of the items that they've submitted that comply with the list that was included on the August 20th letter. So as you see in your attachments, they've submitted most of what was on that list. I think there is one or two items that are coming, that are pending, and then there are another couple of items that are going to be discussed by them tonight as part of their approach proposal to you. So. And so in an effort to move this project forward, we've invited them here, and I'll just go ahead and ask them to come up and present their information.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chair I'm Randy Tyler, and this is Ed Darrow. And we're excited to be here once again. It's actually been almost a year. I think November 2nd, I believe, was the last time we had an opportunity to chat with you folks. So it's good to be back. And we're going to give you kind of a summary presentation of where the cove is in a variety of ways. Thank you. And then with regard to some of the items, we'll go into more detail. And hopefully we can answer all your questions, and hopefully at the end we'll agree on a path forward. Ed?
Just as a summary, I don't know if all of you understand how we came to this project. We were invited by the city to come and work on this project, and as part of that, when Dave Leland asked us to come, and then we met with the city manager, and then with the mayor, and then with the council, they went through and said, all right, we've got a piece of property that it has a unique problem. In our business, we call it a critical problem or a critical flaw, meaning that if the physical state of the property doesn't allow you to build it, you usually just walk away from the project. In this particular case, we started out with, if it is a problem, how do we fix it, and how do we get it to where it's actually buildable? In doing those negotiations, which Janik and who was the city manager at the time?
Larry Patterson.
Yeah, Larry Patterson. And we sat down and said, all right, well, we would need an incentive to come to the table, and they actually negotiated, we did with them, $1.2 million incentive, just saying, come to the table and take this risk. So that was part of the original DDA. And then together with that, they said, how many millions of dollars do you expect that it'll take to actually figure this out? At the time, we figured it would probably take maybe $2 million to $3 million to figure this site out. We have spent almost $5 million. That's before we started this last round as of November. As of November, we've invested another $1.5 million towards doing the design, which when we were here on November, the commission said we would like you to move forward. There was a unanimous vote for us to move forward, and at that time we were told that we would have a DDA within a couple of weeks. That DDA did not come. We've actually moved forward in good faith, saying that it will ultimately come, and we expect that, and we would expect that it would incorporate all of the items that were in the original DDA. To this point, we've gone through on the infrastructure, and we've completely redone the grading plan. We've done the tree preservation, as I think you all know. We added the trailhead and modified the trail system. And in that effort, that commitment that we made with the engineering firm, which is WRG, which you're familiar with, we invested $127,000. We've completely redone the waterfront residences. As you know, those were originally designed as condominiums, and given the state of the market, that's something that's not buildable. So moving forward with our commitment, we said, all right, how do we modify that? And we took out the subterranean parking, brought the grading up to where we could actually park at grade, and that makes it feasible and brings it back to something that's actually marketable in this particular climate, economic climate. To do that, we spent $187,000 on the architecture and another $143,000 on engineering. Those are commitments which we've made. Then we took the garden site, which was originally Woodley, and I don't know, probably not all of you were here at the time, but Woodley had made a commitment 3 different times to start that project and did not follow through. And there was a number of reasons. The economy was changing, things were happening. But we've taken that site and completely redesigned the plans there. And working with Woodley, who has been a good partner, just made a change in his life and in terms of what he wanted to do. So we took him out of the project, and we redesigned, and we spent another $187,000 of commitments to redesign those units. Also on top of that, just to do the engineering for that site was another $172,000. During that period, from November to now, we've had a management cost of about $350,000. So when you add those numbers up, they get close to about $1.5 million of additional money that we've put in. Previously, including what Woodley committed, there's about $8 million into this project. That doesn't include what the URA put in of $1.176. So that gets you up to almost $9 million. You've made a commitment. We've made a very strong commitment. Our expectation is when we go to the next round of doing equity financing and the overall debt financing, we'll have to come up with $3 to $6 million additional cash. We're prepared to do that. The request is that who is the equity partner? We have any number of people that we've worked with, but in our business, what you have is a definition that's called a bankable package. And to have a bankable package, you have to have your entitlements in your hand. You have to have those things which make the deal actually buildable. And in this case, it's the DDA. The DDA, if there was not a DDA, if in November this commission would have told us that we're not going to move forward, we would have actually walked away from the project. We would have walked away from $5 million. We would not have invested several $1 million again. But the commitment was there from you. We followed through. And what we need at this point is to at least have the DDA put into a form that everybody agrees on. Maybe you don't want to sign it because you don't see the equity at this point, but at least we need to agree on that document. And we've spent a lot of time with our legal and with our going through it in detail. We've submitted that. We do need to make a couple of modifications. In the last week, we've worked on it again and looked at the time frames. So we would like to actually pull that together, and we'll submit it either tomorrow or the first of the week. And I've been working with Eric on that. In regards to the documents which you requested of us, you wanted to submit the plans for the waterfront units. We've submitted those. You wanted the plans for the garden apartments. We've submitted those. You wanted the infrastructure plans. Those have been submitted, and those are full working drawings. a very substantial amount of funds and commitment to get those to that point. There was another request that we renegotiate or talk about the incentives and the credits. We do not want to do that. We expect that we made a commitment. We expect the commission to follow through on that commitment. The original DDA had a credit of $1.2 million just as an incentive, saying come to the table. And then the next thing was, if you in fact spend several millions of dollars to figure this out, which quite honestly, this is the most money we've ever put in one project up front without knowing that it's going to go forward. So it actually has gone a little beyond what we would have actually committed. If we'd have known it would have taken that kind of money to figure this site out, we would not have done it. But we've actually got it figured out. We've made it work. And we would expect those credits to still be there. And the way that works, one was an incentive for 1.2, and another one, if you go to what's 9.2 in the original DDA, it says that for the funds that we expended, we would get an additional credit for that against the property once it's appraised and get a credit towards that purchase price. The property has been appraised. We've approved that appraisal. It hasn't gone to a final format yet, but it's $2.750, $2,750,000. That's very close what we had estimated that it would come in, given the market and given what it takes to produce an apartment project. So that's been approved. We did submit a construction contract. We submitted it actually last year. We resubmitted it this last week. That will take some modifications and some editing by your staff and by our staff. And then we get to the equity and the debt. The statement is in that letter that we need to provide you with who the equity partner is. I cannot do that until I have what I call the bankable package. I need to have the entitlements completed, and I need to have a DDA that's either signed or is approved by this commission. We've gone through and annotated all of the things that we think are necessary, and they're not extreme. There's nothing extraordinary in that package. So I cannot bring equity to the table. I did share some equity sources with Eric, ones which I'm not prepared to publish at this time, but very substantial entities. One of them I've dealt with since 1985, a very large institutional entity which is reviewing the project, doing their due diligence. But when I go to these entities, every one of them says, you don't have a buildable project. This project is not feasible without your DDA. Where is that? I need to have that document either signed or at least reviewed and accepted by this commission. The other one that's a tough one is the Parker Pond property. Woodley purchased that property, and in our original agreement with him, because he did pay over the market price for that property as part of our partnership, we were going to give him internally a credit against the rest of the project that would reduce that price for him. So he has a very substantial amount of funds in there. His deal with us is that he actually signed an application for us to modify the project, modify his property, and go through and do a whole new set of plans, which we have done. And that was the commitment which I talked about earlier. So he's accepted that. He would like us to write him a check for that property. But in this business, when you write a check for a piece of property, you better have your entitlements and you better have your bank financing in line. You don't walk out. There's been several people in this business that have come to this business and say, all right, that's a great piece of property, I'll buy it. They can't get it entitled, so they're stuck with it. We don't do that. We've been doing it for 45 years. You get your entitlements, you get your bankable package, you walk in, you get your financing, you bring your equity to the table, then you close on property. And that's the way we have to do it. So we can purchase Woodley's property, and we can actually bring documents that will show that we will purchase it, but it has to be done timely. We want to go to our lending community, bring back the commitments which is in the DDA, which says, we have to prove that we've got a plan that works. We have to show ultimately that we have a loan commitment, and ultimately that has to be a signed loan agreement. So, you've got us locked in. And when we went back to Janik and talked about how we could redo the DDA, we said, look, give us milestones. Give us things that we have to prove, and we'll do it. Don't just give us a blank check and say, all right, hopefully you'll do what you say you're going to do. Give us time frames. So we've gone through and laid those time frames out in this particular new DDA, and we would like that to go through and be approved. I understand from Eric that it will be with Janik the first of next week. We would like to participate maybe at the end of that meeting or directly thereafter to get our 2 cents in on what is expected from our side. And I think the big thing is everything is in a position right now. Everything is completed 99%. What we need is for the commission to help support us and to say that we're going to look at the DDA, we're either going to sign it and make it conditional upon us proving that we have equity. That would be my preferable position. Say, all right, here's a document. I can give that to my partners. I can give that to the lender, and they'll say, well, it is signed, but it's not effective until you do this and this. I can do this and this. I can bring the equity and I can bring the financing. So I need that document one way or the other. So that's one of our main requests, is that this body would go through and review that through your third-party counsel, whomever, and support us on that. We've made an unbelievable commitment in terms of dollars and time. If you look at it in total, $9 million is a lot of money for all of us to walk away from. You made a very substantial commitment in buying 2 pieces of property. You paid for part of our consulting. Maybe there was, I heard there was a question that maybe that wasn't well-spent money, but you would not have a project if you hadn't bought those 2 pieces of property and if we hadn't continued with those consultants. So we have no misgivings about our dealings and our good faith dealings with this body, and we would like you guys to support us. So if there's any questions, I'm open for questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'll have a couple. First of all, I agree with you that my understanding, I guess I might be the only one that was here at the kind of the beginning of this thing. Yeah, I think things had started before I came on the commission 6 years ago. But my understanding is the 1.2 million was a commitment on our part, and that's my personal understanding, and that we basically covered the plans and so forth with the 1.76 that you mentioned. So that we had essentially a commitment on our part of $3 million, and I think that's what you're stating. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was my understanding at the time. I think there's been some discussion at one point about the 1.2 million. But from my standpoint, my understanding at the time, it was a commitment that we had essentially made. I did have a couple of questions, and I'm just looking through this very rapidly at the moment. I was looking at your infrastructural piece here that you had, and it seemed very similar in many ways to what I've seen before. There was a mention of having actually a parking area for the trailhead. Is that still in here? I'm just not spotting
It is. And Randy, you might point that out to them. It's just as you come into the property, under the bridge, McCaughlin Bridge, and just to the right as you're driving in. Right next to Lot 1 there.
Yeah, right there. Right up in here is the, showing a water feature and a parking lot, and a pathway that connects with the rest of the pathway system.
Okay. What side of
It's on the right-hand side as you drive in.
okay.
I believe it's...
So it's on the cove side?
No.
There's
it's
another
not on the
parking
coast
lot
side.
up there.
It's on the shopping center side.
But isn't that a parking lot that you've obligated yourself for that's right in the center, next to where you would propose to have the kind of the commercial building? No, right down, right there, yes.
Well, these are 2 different things, but this is, when you come into the property, there's probably 29 spaces or so right here that was a direction given to us by the commission to add those. That connects across the street and then connects into the trail system that comes back. This is a independent parcel here. This is Lot 5. These are the waterfront units, which are Lot 2, Lot 3, 4, 5, 4, 6, and 7. These are the number of buildings here, so those don't comply. But this piece, which is the Tri-City piece, that goes with this piece to make that buildable, because you have to have parking to support that office building.
Yeah.
This is 65 to 80,000 square feet.
Okay, and I guess I was looking in the wrong place for that. Maybe that parking area had changed, but that's going to have access to the sidewalk system, which will connect into the trail.
Absolutely, and also there's a mandate to have parking down here. This is public parking also.
Yeah.
And I believe this is close to 30 spaces. Then there is a public restroom in this area.
Okay.
That's all part of the infrastructure
I'm
program.
going to come back to where you've got it then, in terms of the safety of pedestrians of getting across there, crossing Main Street extension.
It will be, there is no signalization. It will just be, they'll have to, be
Have a
careful
crosswalk,
going across.
essentially.
Crosswalk, yes.
The other question I had, and I don't think I've posed it before, but when we put the current walking path along the cove in there, the cost was double to what we expected because of remediation we had to do with petrol-related material that was underneath there. Does your cost take care of the anticipation that you may actually have to remove material from the site and bring other material in?
That is part of the overall program. Right now, we have it so we balance on site. The expectation is that we will have to remove the materials. There is approximately 78,000 cubic yards that comes out of Lot 1, which is right across from the trailhead. That material does not look like it's good. We've done several potholes there, so that might be an export. The expectation is there will be some unique anomalies along the waterfront. Having done 8 waterfront projects, part of those in industrial areas, it's always a pain in the neck. I mean, it's you have to plan for contingencies. We will actually be putting aside probably an extra $1 million over and above the infrastructure dollars which is committed by the city, the $7 million, just for an additional contingency, even though we have contingency within the public investment budget.
I guess my frustration is your frustration. Of course, this has been ongoing for 6 years, and I understand it's the economy. It's at what point do we say this is doable or not doable, and how much time are we going to require to proceed on this project in terms of getting the funding and so forth? That is there a deadline time in which we can operate?
Our expectation is that we would like to break ground in the spring of next year. We have quite a few things to do. We've worked very closely with Tony Conkle. All of the modifications that we are making to the plans are a Type 2 administrative modification. Nothing exceeds a 10% requirement. So those are pretty straightforward. What we have to complete is the working drawings for the 2 buildings, the apartments and the waterfront units. The infrastructure plans are 99% done. That's a major set of plans, which is probably that thick. And those have gone through several iterations. They've already gone to the city 3 times, been redlined and reviewed. So we need to finish up. The primary thing is the land use. And we need to have a DDA that gives us the ability to bring the funds to the table. We've committed very substantial funds. But when you go out to the investment community, they don't care where you've been. They want to know that you've gotten rid of the risk. So we have reduced the risk to where it's very manageable, and that's what they expect us to do. So we need to rely on you to support us at that level.
Kathy?
I'm a little bit confused about the phasing here. I see waterfront residences Phase 3, waterfront residences Phase 1A. And so can you go through the phasing for me?
Yeah, that was the architect's error in putting that on the apartments.
Could you? I'm going to ask you to also pull that out a bit so all of us can see it. We've got staff heads in the way.
Staff heads.
Thank you.
Whoa.
Let's see.
It sounds kind of
Public won't be able to see it, but
sounds kind of like a Romney thing with the binders full of women. Staff heads.
There basically is Phase 1 is broken into 2 complements. It's Phase 1A and 1B. 1A is 204 waterfront units, not including Lot 5. Then to get the increment high enough to support your contribution of $7 million and make sure that was covered at a minimum of 80%, we had to include another 96 units into the first phase. So Phase 1 is 204 units, then an additional 96 units of these garden apartments. That's kind of a unique thing to do in our business, to combine 2 product types, but given that they have different price points, we're not concerned with the one competing with the other one. and we've done projects up to 450 units at one time. So this is not like an extraordinary number of units. Then, so that's Phase 1A, 1B, which really is Phase 1. That represents probably anywhere from $53 million to about $58 million worth of product. Then Phase 2 is the remaining units in the garden apartments. That's 158 units. It will right now that exceeds our 10%, but we believe that we can actually get another building in here, which would be another 14 units, and we'll be coming back to staff to review that. So you got Phase 1A, 1B, and then Phase 2. Then Phase 3 would be either this office building or this office building. And that's kind of a function of the market. Right now, the market is probably 25 to 35% vacancy in suburban office space. We can't build either one of these at this point in time. What we have done in the past on smaller projects like this, we brought in single users, we build the building for them, and then we actually get that accomplished and built. That will be one of the things that we look at. You have also approved both of these for hospitality. Hospitality right now is a good market. So our expectation was, subject to getting our DDA again, that we would put all of our time and effort into getting this off the ground and then subsequently go out and put this to the market so we could actually get that started also.
So those are lots 1 and 5?
Yeah, lots 1 and 5.
Thank you.
The necessity here, and in the DDA, we are asking the commission, the city, to secure this 65-year lease on this piece, which is the Tri-City piece. So when you go through and you look at the infrastructure, and I think that's one of the big things, where's your money being spent? It's being spent on creating this area here, which is the entry, the streets and the streetscape, the new roundabout, the street which is modifying Agnes and putting that in, putting in the North Park, remediating the whole waterfront area, and regrading this, because what we have to do, this is, as you know, is very steep across here. We're going to take and cut that, roll that dirt back up, and create these pads up here to bring those out of the floodplain.
Excuse me, may I ask another question? So you're going to use the existing Agnes Street?
No.
Oh.
The existing Agnes is back down here.
Right,
This is a new Agnes.
okay. Because I've watched that thing go up and down for me. Be filled.
We don't want it to go up and down.
No.
Now, ODOT is requiring that not to be a through street.
That's correct.
Ed, concern about the future assessed value of all of this. As we've talked, we're talking about 81% of the values that will convert in real dollars to pay the debt, or effectively the $10 million of debt that we will be effectively obligating ourselves for with new financing. And if we are only paying 80 or 81%, then we're actually paying on debt that will push out all of our debt payments to a later date. Recently, I went through and tried to do a calculation of debt, trying to understand it. And right now, we have $30 million of debt that pays out in 2028. And the cost on all of the people that are supplying money to us is really very high. So like $12 million of the payout of that debt comes right out of education in the college, the school ASD, and education state school fund that supports the state of Oregon City Schools. So when we look at these monies that are there, if we are not getting adequate TIF, so the critical issue to me, one of the critical issues, is how do we generate enough TIF so that your project does not cost the school district or the fire department or any of the taxing districts money, because over and over in years out further, So it's how do we get a good feeling that you are covering all of the costs of the money that the citizens are going to, or all of these taxing districts, which are really funding Oregon City Urban Renewal. How do we get the TIF up to such a level to say that it pays off in a reasonable time frame, and we're not paying good money after effect bad, pushing out the debt. So if we right now are scheduled to pay out our debt in 2028, if we add on more time onto this could be 2030, 32, and that's really not reasonable. So the question comes back is how can you refine the project to make it reasonable on all the other people that are funding us? We've got to have some stewardship in how we use their money to come back and give them a return on investment.
Well, what we have done as the requirement of this body, we went back and modified the plan to create the 1A and 1B. That's the total of the 300 units. That is a very substantial commitment, and it is over 80%. And quite possibly, if in fact the market is correct, we will go into phase 2 directly on the tail of finishing phase 1. That's a risk that you will be taking. That would more than cover the increment, because that'll kick it up to about $80 million to $88 million, depending upon how the county assesses it. Right now, our expectation is that it would come in about $80 million, $79 million, but it could go up all the way to $88 million. And I worked with Andy Parks, went through his numbers, then like you, not totally understanding it, I just sat and spent a whole day figuring out how you analyze it and how you do it, and I ended up doing the same math that he does, and I sent it back to him and said that's correct, because I couldn't quite understand it, because you need to understand it.
How do we gain some degree of assurance that the appraised values that are coming in represent enough actual dollars and cents revenue coming to pay for the debt? And we don't even know what new bond debt or how we might finance this, and we know that our line of credit for the remaining $6 million plus has been canceled. So we now have some guns pointed against our head on our side on how we could bring together a package from our side to you, even if you could come up with this thing. And one of the key problems is that the banking community wants to see adequate TIF generated. And I don't know that 80% is going to the banking community in this world may be adequate of real dollars coming in. They may want more. And so are you prepared to come up with something that would present more TIF so that they are satisfied? Because we got to sell our package too.
No, I understand that, and I think that we went from 204 originally. Actually, we went from just doing the garden apartments, and that was supported. That was the initially approved. That was at 220 units. We would build that, and you would actually make the investment of $7 million. Then as time went by and we had to modify our plan, we said, all right, we'll add another 72 units to the 204. That kicked it up, and we did the math, and Andy Parks came back and said, well, you need to get up higher, so we kicked it up to the 300 units. That's our maximum. We're at a break point. That's a phenomenal amount of commitment to put on the market at one time, and those of you that are in the real estate business would agree. Right now is the best time I've ever seen in my life, and I've been doing this for 45 years, for financing. It's exceptional. It's unbelievable. We are looking at commitments that are at 5.5 cap rates. That'll push this values phenomenal, way up. So I think that there is a risk without any question, but that's part of what you're doing, and it's what I've done all my life. We are taking a phenomenal risk, and I think that it's a risk that's well considered and is very doable.
Well, Eric, Tony, is there any way we can get this cross-validated so we can have some degree of independent assessments made quickly that could tell us whether or not we have an adequate TIF generation coming in that covers this debt?
Right. Well, yeah, we've talked with Andy Parks, our consultant, on this, and we have run the new figures that Ed and Randy have submitted, the new apartment units. And we did run it out for a 15-year amortization. We could still meet it at that point, but I think our trouble now is trying to find a lender who will, I guess, grant us, if you will, a 15-year AM. And that's the lending world has changed since this deal first started. So that's kind of been our dilemma to this point. If we can stretch it out to the 15-year, I think we can make it on these amount of units at that 80%. So that holds true. Now that goes up until the 80% runs up for 3 or 4 years until they can, if the market is flexible enough where they can start the next phase, then it flips over. So the TIF will flip over, and we'll actually be gaining revenue, and we won't be trying to fill that gap.
One of the incentives that we have for moving to Phase 2 is a very substantial amount of money invested that doesn't come back until we do Phase 2. We're having to not only capitalize the first phase, but we're actually buying all the property from Woodley that is Phase 2. So we're sitting there with a whole bunch of money invested that if we don't move it forward, we get no return, and our whole project is kind of shuffling. So we've got a phenomenal incentive to go to Phase 2, which when we go to that phase, you're way beyond covered. So it's there's some mutual issues here, that a combination of trust, but there are pressure points on us to make sure we do it also.
I would love to see a cash flow analysis or something that comes along that's easy to read, that tells us, gives us some degree of surety that we are not putting any of the citizenry or the Urban Renewal Commission or anybody into jeopardy along the line with what's being proposed, as well as all of as a stewardship of all of the other entities that we're using their money, we're investing or playing with their money. So we've got to be responsible all along the way with their money that they're giving to us, to give them a return on investment.
One of the things that Andy Parks does, he uses your yearly income versus the actual cash flow. I did it both ways. I ran it on a cash flow basis, and it's more than covered. But when you do it on a year-end approach that he uses, you're not even recognizing the capital and the cash that are coming in from the units that are being, delivered. So there's and you might talk about that. I didn't bring that up to you guys, but I went through it and I said, why? I asked him, how come you're not saying this is covered to a higher degree? You're getting actual cash flow. When you brought up the cash flow, that made me think about it, because I did a cash flow analysis. So there's some things there, little anomalies that will make it better from your side. But I think the biggest thing, once again, is that having done any number of multi-phase projects, a lot of projects, we've done 1,000-acre projects where you don't make any money until you're almost at the very last phase, which is 5 or 6 or 7 phase. So you're pushing everything to make sure that you get to that next round, to make sure that your investment is correct. And the investment community that we work with are large institutional entities. Teachers has been one of our best entity that we've worked with over the years, and they look at all those cash flows and all those projections, and if you've delivered like we have over many, many years, then you get the support. So I think that I'm comfortable with our commitment and our ability to move the thing forward and actually start the second phase, and we'd like to obviously do the office buildings too.
If I could just mention one other thing, we could assume and run numbers as much as we want, but until we figure out what kind of deal we're going to get from the lenders, we really don't know. So that's what the finance director, Wyatt, and myself are working on currently.
And TIF is going to determine the level of TIF we have will reduces the risk and improves our financing. So it goes hand in glove. Phil?
Back to this, I have several questions. The first one relates to kind of the timing issue. As I understand it, you're asking us to either commit to a DDA or sign a DDA, which essentially would then be the deal that you would go out and shop to an equity partner and then come back and we'd execute on the deal that we offered you at this point. Is that basically what you're suggesting?
With one little caveat there, it can be executed but not be effective until we perform.
Got it. So what happens when we sign the DDA and the city can't find the 15-year AM? Or how do we deal with that risk? It seems to me that's a real risk. Eric's been mentioning that now for a month or two in our meetings. And the second thing is, what about this fiscal cliff, which is staring us in the face in January? If our leaders in Washington don't get their act together, we could be looking at a 4% decline in GDP next year, which would put us in a negative 2% range, and we're all up the creek. What happens if that occurs? What kind of contingencies do we have for the economy just going off the tracks?
The apartment community, having built probably 10,000 units in multiple states, is the best place to be at those points in time. You have people that can't afford to own houses. You have rental units. We've done a lot of work on this project to make sure that it's within a market rate. And our expectation is that our interest rates will give us a lot of flexibility to even reduce those rates. If you look at what happens, you go through these projects, and it's amazing what's going on right now. It's very positive from the builders, developers' point of view for multifamily, because you can actually get substantial funds, and you can actually make most projects pencil out that wouldn't never have penciled out.
You may be right, but if we go into a 2% recession with 11% unemployment or something in Oregon, I mean, I don't know that we're going to be able to move forward on this. Or if we can't get our 15-year amortization money, I don't know that we can go forward at the 81%. So I'm just wondering how we would deal with that in the DDA. How would you suggest we deal with that?
It's in the DDA.
It is in the DDA. We are requesting in our current submission that be proven to us within 60 days. That's not going to change our commitment. We've already committed phenomenal amounts of money. We're moving forward. We made the commitment to do the project. We're going to do it. If you guys have some stumbling blocks, then we'll have to work that through and see what it takes to get to that level.
Yeah.
We're committed to doing the project. You guys would have an out. That will be part of the DDA. There's no locking you into that. We can't do that. But we're looking at, once again, good faith, best efforts. That's our expectation from this commission.
I've got one other question, if I could. A risk that hasn't been addressed, to my satisfaction at least. We're dealing with a man-made pond. It's my understanding that a few years ago the county had to spend $300,000 to dredge it because it was beginning to silt out. I'm concerned, because it's a man-made pond, because although you're going to get the apartments out of the floodplain, the pond is going to be in the floodplain for sure, continually. And the next flood comes, could alter the mouth of the pond in some way, it could silt it up, and I'm very concerned that if we make a major investment on the Esplanade and the infrastructure down there, on the expectation we're having high-end real estate, or relatively high-end real estate to sell or rent, and then the thing silts up, and we don't have the money to dredge it and make it a nice pond again, what do we do?
Can I make a comment? Probably we have the person actually that who knows about it.
Jerry's back there, and I've heard Jerry talk about this.
No,
before.
not Jerry.
No, it's not Jerry.
It's not Jerry.
No, it's a person, Richard Craven, who actually was employed. But the pond didn't silt up.
Well, no, I know the pond didn't silt up.
Well, you said the pond silted
No,
up.
what I meant to say was
the mouth.
But I think
the mouth.
Yeah, right. We might have a better testimony from an expert on it.
I'm concerned both in the likelihood of it occurring, because I think there's some small likelihood that it's occurring without dispute. The question that I have is, how do we deal with it financially if it occurs?
Whose responsibility?
If that risk occurs, whose responsibility would it be to fix the cove, which means putting it back into this artificial condition it's in, as opposed to whatever might be the natural state that it would be in.
I think it would be a good question for Richard. I understand that there is a migration of the water through the rocks, that it actually could leach out through that. It could actually move back and forth. The peninsula, that has water actually coming under it and coming into the pond. The question that I get into is, does that ultimately change the quality of the water to where it creates a problem? Not so much that we have navigable program, because our package is not predicated on having boats, having all this navigation. That would be a preference. So if it actually did close off the mouth, I don't think that it will change it, but I'm not the expert on that.
And I'm not either. My question is really, I guess, twofold. One, what's the likelihood of the risk occurring in the next 100-year flood or 50-year flood or whatever? And then secondly, if it does occur, who pays for it? Or is it necessary to continue the business plan of renting it? I mean, because if it does, in fact, end up as a salt marsh, not a salt marsh, it's not in the ocean, but if it ends up as sort of a marshy situation as opposed to a pond, I think we've got a serious problem. And I'm just concerned about making the investment without having some solution in hand to deal with a problem that seems to me is almost inevitable going to occur at some point.
Just a very quick comment. Having built several projects on marshes and in the California area, those actually were preferred spots to be because of what's happening with the habitat. It was amazing. You could sell units all day long looking out at a marsh. I mean, I don't think that this is going to change the quality of the living. It actually might even increase some of the unique visual character that you would get with that change. But I don't really have the answer. I just know what I've seen and what I've built on and what I've done in the past. I'm not worried about it, and that's a major investment for us.
I would like to ask a question around, we do have Richard Craven back here, and he's the,
Ring him up if that's okay with that.
if Richard, would you be interested to comment? For a lot of people who don't know Richard, he actually did most all of the work on the dredging plan, and is a certified. Well, go ahead. You can give him the credentials you have. But he sits on our Natural Resources Committee.
Yeah, for the record, I am Richard Craven, and mostly retired environmental consultant, mostly in the Pacific Northwest over the last 30 years, but up and down the West Coast for nearly 40 years. I've worked on a lot of projects. I've worked on this project, the dredging permit for this project, about 10 years ago when it was part of the bank restoration for the cove. And then about 5 years ago, I was under contract to the county to relook at this with the city to find out what we needed to do to update the dredging permits that we got 10 years ago. And subsequent to that, I did do the permitting for a new dredging permit for the mouth of Clackamas Cove. Now, I'm not exactly sure what your question is. If you have a specific question.
Well, a lot of it is in the rock flows that are coming down the river in high water events, and the potential of even the peninsula itself washing out where it was fortified in that one area where the currents kind of come in against the peninsula. There has always been conjecture that a major high water event could just wash out a significant part of the whole peninsula, and then the whole thing would be opened up at a high line right into the Clackamas Cove. Well,
that's what was addressed about 10 years ago with the bank restoration project upstream from the tip of the peninsula, maybe, 400 feet or so. And it's my understanding that the city is now looking at additional potential solutions to erosion further downstream near the tip of the peninsula, if I understand what Tony was telling us the other day at the meeting. Now, I did a short presentation of this to the Natural Resource Committee showing graphics going back to 18 1878 or 1880 or maybe a little before that. And sequential USGS quads from about, I believe it was 1898, was the first USGS quad, somewhere in there, going up to more or less present day. And there's always been a big gravel bar in that region. It's always on the quad maps. It'll always be there. And that gravel bar is there most likely because you have what's called a backwater condition from the Willamette River. You have rushing water coming down the Clackamas, hitting the still water that's backed up from the Willamette at certain times of the year. The velocities slow down, the bed load drops, and therefore you have a nice pile of gravel out there. Now, I don't have a solution for that, but before you start proposing solutions, I think you need to identify what your objective is, what your goals, what your objectives are for that area, and then develop solutions around that objective.
Can I ask a question? So the gravel is going to be a constant, is what I just heard.
My opinion, yes.
Okay, and we spent $300,000 a few years ago to alleviate the problem, at least in terms of navigability for that cove.
There was no dredging done under either of the permits.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What problem did they solve? I thought the sheriff used to put his boats up in there. Maybe they still do. And they couldn't for a while, and they
So
can't.
they moved out.
They moved out, but didn't they spend some money to do that?
No.
They never did.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, well, then the question with respect to this is, what if we don't do anything about this gravel bar, if we don't dredge it, and it continues to build, what does that do to the cove over time? What does that do to the natural flow of the river over time?
I cannot answer that question. I know there is a lot of intergravel movement of water through the peninsula itself. At higher flows, you'll get backwater, continue to get backwater in the cove because the elevation of the water increases so much during wintertime, spring, winter, and so forth. During summertime flows, now, not right now, but a few weeks ago, you could go out there under low flows, and Jerry can provide more information on that, I believe. But at that time, you could walk across it.
And so I guess my question is, what risk is there to the Esplanade that we're about to being asked to invest in, to these homes there? What risk is there to the way we're assuming that this is going to stay like this forever, and do we need to continually take that gravel bar away to keep it like this, or not? And if we don't take the gravel bar away because we don't have the funds to do it, what does it do to this cove? What does it do to the ecosystem down there, basically, the geology of it all?
Well, again, it kind of gets down to what's the best and highest use for that area. And at some point in time, the city decided that it was to develop around it, basically. Now, I'm not sure a lot of thought has been given to what needs to be done at the mouth of the cove to keep it open. But I know that in the past, we've talked about have some limited boat, and I'm not sure how big a boat is, but some limited recreational access into that cove for most of the year, if possible, except during those low flow times when you might not be able to get a vessel into the cove, that would be moving up the river and into the cove. Now, a more important thing to me, I think, and I believe it should be to the city, county, is the potential impact on water quality by forming some kind of a barrier, especially during summer and fall.
You mean water quality in the cove?
Yes.
Water quality in the cove.
Instead of having an algae bloom or something.
Having an algae bloom and whatever that entails. So basically, I think the issues need to be given, whatever they are, whatever you come up with, need to be given adequate consideration and developed.
And that's really what I'm driving at, is what's the risk of that occurring? What's the risk of those sort of negative? Now, I agree with, if it turns out to be a beautiful, duck-laden swamp, maybe that's the best possible use for it rather than open water. But I'm concerned about the negative consequences. I'm concerned about the risks for the public purse here. And it just seems to me that I've been listening to this issue from Jerry. I mean, I've never met you before, for years, and I've never adequately had an answer to the question of what is the risk and what do we do about it if it happens? Who's going to pay? Because now we're going to have millions of dollars down there, including your money and our money, all tied up, and the pressure is going to be on the city commission and the county commission to come up with the money, and they don't have the money. And I'm just worried about that.
Let me answer it, partially this way, I guess. The county and the city have spent money in the past to take a look at preparing dredging permit applications, getting permits in anticipation of dredging. Now, that suggests to me that somebody thinks that something needs to be done down there. Now, since we got those first permits 10 years ago, and then again 4 years ago, I believe now, there's been a lot of gravel moved down that river to add to that existing gravel bar. And I don't know how much it is, but it's continuing to build downstream, and you can see it out there. And it's not an easy fix. It's not like going out and building jetties in the river or something, or trying to armor the bank. The gravel is coming from someplace. Maybe some of it's coming from the peninsula, but it's coming from upstream areas. Now, what might exacerbate the problem just a little bit is the fact, I understand, maybe it's not a fact, but I understand that Portland General Electric will be pouring in a lot of gravel upstream around River Mill Dam. Now, Jerry's got more information on that as part of their mitigation project. Now, if gravel is moving or being put in upstream under high flow conditions, some of it is going to be moving downstream. I don't know how fast it's going to be moving. I don't know where it's going to settle out or anything like that, but you can, kind of conclude that, well, you're probably going to get a little more gravel down there in time from that mitigation. And I don't know how many yards they're talking about. It's my understanding it's a lot of gravel. Now, I don't think I've really answered your question in terms of the probability of cutting off the mouth of the cove, but you can go out there under low flow of a couple of weeks ago, and you can see that it's just a trickle of water, running out of the cove under those conditions.
While Richard's here, is there others that want to talk to him on this?
Just a question. In terms of material moving into the cove from surrounding areas, what do you think the likelihood that it's going to fill up? I mean, the algae bloom is one thing, but the other thing is the cove, I think, is fairly deep.
Yeah.
And over a reasonable period of time, is there enough erosion of material around in the cove area that's going to actually cause the cove to fill up at short time?
You know what? I would not anticipate that would happen. Obviously, there's going to be some erosion, but I just can't imagine that cove being filled up by situations around the cove.
What about a 100-year flood event, though? I mean, how do you know it can happen when the water comes?
Okay, a 100-year flood event, I'd be having a lot of water come down the river. You'd have high backwater in the Willamette. Water would be pushed back into the cove, and you would have some settling of some fine sediments. There's no question about it as water levels go down. But I just can't see that as a really important issue to consider. You should consider it, I guess, but to me, it's down the line in terms of priorities, in terms of filling up. I just don't think it's going to fill up with sediments. I just don't think the source is there because there's no water flowing directly into the cove except, the backwater impact.
Richard, what in the probability of the peninsula that we are envisioning as part of the park and our amphitheater going all the way down there, if you take a look where we put all the concrete and dumped all the stuff to try to shore it up when it was washing out. I hear people that say that they still believe there's a high probability at a high water event that that's poised because of just the way the currents are now bouncing off the Gladstone side. It's pointing right at that. And if we have a major, or not even a major, but a high water event, we're going to start putting that part of the landmass there truly in jeopardy. What do you think about that probability?
Now, let me get it straight that I understand exactly what you're talking about. You're talking downstream
I'm
of the
talking
bank
about
restoration?
upstream. I'm right in there. Yeah, right in that area, particularly right where the tip right in there.
Okay, okay.
Not up, not down, not too close to the mouth, but right in here.
Yeah, that's where the bank restoration area was.
Yes.
Several years ago. And that area looks pretty good right now. I've been out there a few times, looked at it from the other side, and walked down on that side and looked at it. But it's my understanding that the city is considering looking at the area downstream from that. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I was talking where
the same area?
That same area, because everybody says it's primed to go out again.
Well, I haven't seen it that way, but I can go back and look.
Question I would have, even if the whole peninsula disappeared, it's not going to change the cove. It might get more sediment in it. It might get more gravel coming down, but the cove itself is going to stay there, and that's it's what's going downstream.
Again, though, you have to figure out, come up with what you want it to look like out there. What do you want to do out there? What do you want to maintain?
What
do you want
afford?
What do you want to go away? Well, that's part of the visioning process and looking at options and opportunities.
Richard, did you say that there is a flow underneath the peninsula from the river into the cove?
When the water goes down, starts going down, you can see some gravel or some water coming through the bank. Now, how much that is, I don't know. And I don't know that it's actually coming from the river over to the cove or just the storage in the bank of the peninsula that's draining out as the water goes down. Now, Jerry Herman may have more information on that. I don't.
Anybody else have any questions? More questions for Richard? Okay, if not, thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
Kathy, you're up. Thanks.
My question's pretty simple. I'm not seeing, maybe I'm just not seeing it all, but the conversion to condos, is that still part of the project?
That's our intent, yes.
Okay.
There is a very nice profit center sitting there in the event that we could do that. Usually, it's about 1.6 times the value that when you convert that it goes up.
Okay.
And a good portion of that, probably 20-25% of that is actually profit. So that's a very unique incentive for us that we would like to be able to do that.
Okay,
yes.
so the provision's still there.
Yes.
And that new valuation would mean higher TIF as well.
Doug?
Okay, yes. Well, first of all, the Woodley property comes up again, and as you're talking about phase one, including development on that piece, right?
I'm not sure what.
The piece across Main Street from where you're at.
Yeah, the parking lot? Is that what you're saying?
The garden apartment?
Yeah,
The garden apartments.
Yeah, those,
Oh, the garden apartments, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's 1B, that's 96 units of the
Right.
300.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you still have agreements with them? That is, you're not the property owner there at this point.
That's correct.
And so, Mike, I'm curious as to what happens if you can't come in agreement to do that.
Well, there's a unique reason why both parties will come to the table. Without the dirt that's on the project, not in that location, that site is not buildable. So it is part of the overall master plan that requires fill. So
The point is, they're still in the discussions with you.
oh, without any question, yeah.
Okay.
That's Todd Woodley is the owner. He purchased that from Parker.
Right.
He has still a commitment to finalize that ultimate purchase. Our hope would be that we would actually be able to take that burden off of him and purchase it before he has to write that last check. which is about $1.2 million to the land seller, to him. So there's a lot of reasons why we're all sitting at the table to make it work.
Yeah. I'm just going to make a couple of comments because they're always being made. The county and the school district and everybody losing money. They're not losing any money because there's no money that's coming, almost no property tax money that's coming from that property anyway. In fact, none from the Urban Renewal District property because we own it, and so it's under public ownership. Now, of course, what you're talking about is future debt. The point is that undoubtedly when you develop there are going to be services that are going to be costly in some way to the school district, to the fire district, and so forth. But this is an investment, and even if it goes out to 20 years, at one point, the taxing entities, assuming a successful project, will get substantial monies from this particular project. It is an investment. It's an investment in the future as far as those taxing districts are concerned. I understand, for example, the fire district has issues with the new urban renewal districts and so forth. I've never heard in that whole time, either outside the commission chambers or otherwise, any school superintendent coming before us opposed to the urban renewal district here, the fire district coming opposing this particular urban renewal district. I've never heard that coming forward. And I think the reason it doesn't come forward is the land isn't worth anything. They're not getting any money from it. Any tip that comes forward is coming from essentially a zero base in terms of money that's coming in. And so what will happen in 20 years is probably what they look at as being an investment themselves.
The property was appraised when we first started at $12 million negative. So that was done by the city. That was part of our analysis that we did with engineers and what have you. So it had a very substantial negative value.
Yeah. And even if it has a positive value at this time, it's owned by the city. So there's no taxes collected on it.
Yeah, and I think usually I look at, when I do projects like this, what have I done in the past? When we did Oswego Point, the city was able to go out within 3 years after we started that project and get $4.6 million, and they started the very first start of Lake Oswego downtown redevelopment. So that was based on our project. And I think you had some numbers that they've picked up maybe $21 million over the time. So it is an investment. It's not instant. There is risk. We're all taking a risk, but I think it's a very understandable risk and a manageable one.
Well, the key to it is there's a lot of people who don't truly understand urban renewal finance and how it works, and I can profess that I'm not the expert, but I may know more than a lot of people because I spent a lot of time trying to understand it. And I understand that right now the school district is contributing to paying off our debt. Right now we have scheduled out through 2028 debt in payments, and that's going to come to $30 million. And so until that debt is paid off, they get not one dime. And so if we talk about present value monies that they're going to be investing to 2028, education as an entity is going to be investing $12 million of money to 2028 right now, no matter what we do, virtually. And so that money is not money in their hand. And some people don't really understand that that's money that could go to reducing class sizes or having programs or teachers or whatever it is. But we have debt, and we have to get the money to pay that debt, and it either comes from TIF by increasing TIF. And if the TIF that you create is not adequate to cover the debt, then we extend the time out to where we keep on taking their money that's tax revenue just to pay the debt. And it's almost like a Ponzi scheme. And if we don't get our hands on it, we're in trouble. And this is like Social Security. It's taking money from Social Security and saying, oh, some future generation is going to pay for it. We're really putting it onto somebody else's credit card. So the key to me, one of the key important ingredients is you coming up with adequate TIF that that covers this debt and covers it within the same time frame that we now have, which our schedule is to pay off the $10 million bond that we now have, is scheduled to be paid off in 2028. And so somehow, if we can get this into that fix, and it doesn't push out our debt to a further time frame, and we have some degree of assurance that we're going to bring value back to the different entities, be it the fire department or the education community or the schools or Clackamas County or whoever it is, because we have a list of them that are giving us money. We're being fiduciary. We have to be responsible. We have to be stewards of that money. So all I'm asking for is making sure that you come back to us with adequate assessed value that creates TIF over and above what we need to pay for the debt, so that we don't extend our debt out any further than it is now. And I hope that you can do that, because short of that, I get nervous. And I think that that's a critical breaking point where we no longer are good stewards of the monies entrusted into our hands from all of these entities. And we just have to be good stewards.
I understand that. I think the other side of the argument, however, is that we both stepped into this jointly. We both knew what the risks were. We have committed phenomenal amount of money, phenomenal amount. And we're asking you to take a risk which is done by any number of communities which we have dealt with, where it's actually turned out very, very positive. You can always look at the negative side, but when you're investing, you're taking a risk. And that's what I'm expecting.
Going through the investments that we put in, we've invested $3.446 million already in reimbursing you, and I know we've got a box of paper for part of that that's supposed to be asset value. But we need more than that. We've bought land, and we've been putting money out. And when I look at all the transactions, we've got another $2 million that we've invested in consultants and attorneys and all these other people in your behest too. And all of the land registrations and everything else that we've done, until we do a complete financial analysis of what it is, to say, how do we give a return on investment back? And so part of the burden right now on you guys is getting us to a point where we can go to our people, the school district and everybody else that's investing into us, and where you can show us, where we can show them a return on investment. And I'm hoping even calculate in halo effect. What are you going to do? What can you bring to bring up the overall value or create other investments? Maybe a supermarket or a grocery store in the Oregon City Shopping Center or something like that. But something that's going to help us come back and say, hey, community, we were good stewards of your investments, and we're bringing you a return on investment.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that we're walking hand in hand with you. We have not sat on the sidelines. We have written checks, very substantial checks, and that was all predicated on a good faith approach to doing business. We expect you to support that commitment. We haven't stopped our commitment. We're still writing the check. We expect you to do that. There are risks. We have pushed this number and the number of units to a break point. I cannot create more increment at this point in time, but I can tell you that we will push everything to go to the next phase. And that's where it'll actually not only break even, it'll actually give a very substantial return. So you have to do projections that are reasonable. I think they are very reasonable, and I think that Andy's very, very competent and capable of doing that. But you're going to be stepping out to a risk at day one, and that's where we're at.
Anybody else have any?
Betty?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Betty?
I think a lot of good dialogue going on tonight. I'm very excited for you guys to be here to have this dialogue with you. I once again have to say that our Oregon City Superintendent came to us and said, urban renewal does not affect our budget, okay? What affects our budget is how many children are in our community. So if we can get apartments or family homes and get them filled with kids, I think our Oregon City School District would be really happy with us. That's my only comment.
Another comment on the investment. It's been said that urban renewal, for every urban renewal dollar that gets spent, it attracts $3 or $4 in private investment. Now, we're looking at maybe 10 or 12 times on the code. So relative, compared to other urban renewal investments, this is a pretty attractive investment.
We've tried to get the Oregon City Shopping Center to upgrade. When we built the one in Lake Oswego, it not only was upgraded, it was changed phenomenally. We put paths into it. We're going to do the same thing to the Oregon City. It'll create a new set of wealth for them. We're talking several, what's the number of people? We're talking almost 1,100 new people in the area. That will actually help them, and it'll help them, create new income to actually maybe modify that package. They've done a reasonable job here recently, but we would like to see it upgraded. So it has a real push on the whole community.
Anybody else have any comments?
It's on here.
Okay. Doug?
Yeah. The question I guess I would pose is, if there's a concern that this can be done within the 1928 period that you're talking about, within the period it would close under the current conditions, I presume that we can split urban renewal districts. I don't know if it's the best policy to do, but we could do so. That is, we could separate the downtown urban redistrict all the way down to Abernathy Creek, let it close out. The ones that have almost no value, which this is the case, or the landfill project, could stand for a longer period of time. But the point is, there's no tax being created hardly on any of those properties anyway, and then basically require the tax increment financing that comes from those projects to pay off only those projects and not depend upon other segments of the urban renewal district to do it. So I think there's some alternatives in terms of the concern that you're expressing in terms of the risk that we're talking about.
I would love that. Anything else from anybody? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to offer some direction, because we had indicated, I think, to this group that we expected something to happen within the timeline that probably would not be possible. And the question I think that you're looking for, and an answer you're looking for, is whether we're going to proceed on this particular DDA and let it go forward. I guess my question is, I would like to do so, but I would like to have kind of a period of time that we identify to say we're not going to go beyond this, because it has been a long period of time. And you're indicating to us that you think you can get that financing with the DDA within what period of time?
Well, our expectation would be to break ground in July, and we'd like to even accelerate that. So that's the time frame that we're looking to actually put everything together and actually put a shovel in the ground.
So I guess my desire is to say there's a point beyond which we feel this project is not going to go, that we might want to look for other potential uses there. And to give you a sufficient period of time, I guess I would like to say these things have to occur within a certain period of time, and if that doesn't occur, then we're just going to have to say we just don't think we can invest more in it, and that you probably can invest more. And I'm just going to look for our economic development managers for some direction here.
Well, I think there are going to be some land use approvals that need to occur, and I'm not sure quite the timeline on those, so I'd have to refer to Tony.
I thought most everything was done.
Land use.
There are
It has to be
additional amendments that need to be made.
Are these state land use?
No,
No,
it's local.
they're city.
Yes.
Because there's that fast track stuff that we learned about.
Right. this is a local land use approval. The fast track stuff is primarily for industrial development. It is something that we could do locally if we were targeting multifamily. That's a use that we wanted to focus on. We could do that with this. This could be time to implement that. But given the time needed for land use approvals and negotiating the DDA, I think we can negotiate probably the DDA within 60 days. Land use approvals are going to be a different story.
But I'm still very concerned about getting an accurate assessed value on this development. Something that tells us that that minimizes the jeopardy that we might have in this, so that we can say that we can cross-validate it with our with the TIF generation that we need. And I guess Wyatt is going to have to play a role in this and telling us, giving us some reasonable expectations that we would be looking at that we need to have.
So we've run those numbers. We've run those numbers based on a 15-year AM and a given market rate that we have. With that we've had an assessed value of the project, and we've run our numbers against that, and that's how we came up with the 15-year AM and meeting it at 80%. So we have that. I can show you those spreadsheets if you'd like to see that.
I'd like to see those.
And that 15-year AMP keeps it within the 2028 time zone.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but the trick is getting the 15-year AM.
So
That's the key.
yeah.
One quick question to staff. We have a very definitive list of land use approvals that need to go forward, and you are supposed to approve those. They are type 2 administrative modifications. I'd like to request that staff be given the opportunity to make those approvals and bring them back to you. But right now, we've worked very closely with Tony. We've got those very well defined. We're prepared to move those forward, and we'd like you to authorize him to approve of moving those forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
First of all, I think we're getting pretty close to a place where the information we're talking about is really your executive session discussion, and I don't want you to waive that confidentiality by talking about too much of that detail in public. I also want to mention that from a staff perspective, we will not ever be comfortable recommending anything more than a conditional DDA until we know that they can perform. So that, I think that's what you've asked for at a minimum, is a conditional approval of a DDA. So there's a couple things here that I think the commission needs to decide. One is it a 60-day extension for us to finish the negotiations with them on the DDA, the conditional DDA, and also to allow them to proceed to shore up their equity and prove that to you. And then the third thing that will be happening then is for us to work on the financing, because as has been mentioned, we don't have the line of credit anymore. We're closer, I think, than we've been in the past to a financing mechanism, but we still have work to do on that ourselves. So really, I think what the commission needs to consider is whether or not they want to offer that extension for those things to be worked on. I'm not necessarily thinking that the land use approvals, that there needs to be any direction on that. I think we're on top of that.
I'm going to make a motion, just because some things take longer than we anticipate, for a 90-day extension.
I suggest that we make those motions and make the decisions in an executive session.
We can't make a motion or any decision
I
in
don't
an executive
think, we
session.
don't need to make a motion.
Well, wait a minute. I'm looking direction for him. This is not a commitment for us to do anything other than to move forward on this. Is that correct, Mr. Friedman?
Well, you're not making a commitment here except for the staff to continue working with the developer for another, whatever the period of days
that's
are.
what my motion is.
Because you did have a constraint, and today is that deadline.
Yeah, we've got a 60-day constraint.
After today, we don't work on this anymore
Anyway, I put
without direction from
I
the
put forward a motion of the 90-day extension.
Press your button there.
Okay, I'll press my button. Where do I press it? I got it moved to approve. I don't know what to do here. Ah, there it goes.
Who seconded it?
I did.
Discussion?
Sure.
This is an inappropriate thing to discuss in open session. We've had discussions on this in executive session. We should have a continuation of our executive session discussion, not in public. I'll vote no.
Well, wait a minute. We haven't taken the vote yet. You can wait until we come to that point. We've got a motion. We've got a second. We're having a discussion.
Is there any other discussion?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
This is not any commitment other than to proceed with a draft EDA. That's all this is. It's not committing us to anything but that. We've indicated a 60-day extension, which we expected financial security to be obtained, and that would not be possible. And all we're doing here is putting forward a motion to go ahead with the draft DDA. That's all there is. We're not approving a DDA. We're not doing anything of that sort.
Could we just give the city manager and the economic development manager a approval to continue to go at this?
Yes, that's what I've just done.
But without putting a hard, fast 60 days or 90 days. Just all we're doing is just saying.
That would be fine too. And
we're-
what will happen though, just so you know, and I don't know if this would make all the commissioners comfortable, but if we're directed to continue working on this, we will be coming back to you in executive session. The only reason you're having this open session now is that these gentlemen wanted to talk directly to the commission. We couldn't do that legally in executive session. That was the advice that we had. So they're here and they've had their opportunity to say what they want and have that dialogue with you.
Okay. I'll alter the motion to be for you to proceed with a draft DDA without any specific timeline, and you can figure out how you're going to do that.
I think we ought to be having this discussion in executive session.
Is there a second? You're willing to accept the alteration? We still have this in terms of a motion and a second. It's on the floor.
I have a question. I understood at one point someone said we were going to be talking with Steve Janik early in November. Is that?
Staff has a meeting with him on Monday.
Okay, not the commission. Not
Right,
the,
right,
okay.
right.
So that would not
He
be
will be
executive
coming back
session.
to join you
He
in
will.
future executive session discussions about this topic.
Okay.
Definitely will be. He's still part of the team.
Well, if we
We would need Commissioner Peterson to accept this new second.
I do.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, let's have a vote.
Motion is approved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5-2.
There was a request concerning the land use application component of that. If you would, because we are the property owner as the urban renewal agency, and the city manager would need to sign that land use application. At this time, I would recommend that we hold off on that. We're willing to work with them, but I think it'd be more appropriate to get the DDA discussion dealt with, and we can come back to you if we make significant progress on that, and we can have that discussion again at that time.
Okay. Next is city manager's report.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have nothing to report.
Okay. Is any future agenda items? I would like to put on the future agenda, if we could, discussion on our debt and the payout of it, so that people fully understand our urban renewal debt and how TIF comes in to pay it off.
What was that again?
I would like to put on, right now, on our last budget, approved document, it showed that we would be paying off $30 million in 2028.
Okay.
And to generate $30 million, we have to generate it through TIF. And so right now, we need to get it so people fully understand where this money comes from that pays off $30 million. And There are some misinterpretations, and I think it would be responsible for all of us to be on the same wavelength, understanding the same thoughts where there's no confusion,
So you're requesting basically a work session where this is discussed?
where we discuss
That's
that.
fine. Yeah.
So like, who would be the speaker, I guess? I don't know. I'm kind of
Well,
confused.
let's,
Elected city manager?
City manager will decide who will be the speaker.
Yeah, and as much as we can refine what's being asked, because a discussion, we've had a discussion tonight that some of you, I think, have very extensive opinions about urban renewal and how it works. Some of, maybe that you want to have the discussion and we'll just participate to the extent we can be helpful. Maybe
I would really like to see somebody who's like an expert.
Well, there's one other thing, and Betty hasn't been here, so I kind of want to bring her up to speed. But I requested to have on an agenda item that we would have an Urban Renewal 101, either by the League of Oregon Cities or some other organization was suggested, so that we can all ask questions to experts.
Thank you.
We can all address everything, and once and for all, maybe we can get on the same page. We're still going to have different opinions, and that's okay.
yeah.
But we can communicate in a safe way and get some questions answered.
I'd like to pose a question, too. If the potential pros and cons of perhaps subdividing our urban renewal district. I mean,
that could definitely be part of it. I just want to let you know, too, that Eric has already been working on that and trying to set a date for it. We thought we'd get the best use of our resources if we scheduled that after the first of the year, so that if we have new and different Urban Renewal Commission members, that they would be entitled to participate fully and have the same information. So
Perfect.
Thank
Thank you.
Well, I guess we're
Adjourn to exec-
adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Are we going into executive session? Okay.